In the past, I often spoke at congresses like this on legalities of Ayurvedic products, and some friends have asked me if I'm going to speak about that again, and then I said, no, I've come onto something which is more interesting than that. And the question, I want to speak a little bit about the properties of consciousness. And we've heard a lot about consciousness. We've heard a lot about Ayurveda and consciousness, and it's quite obvious that Maharishi Ayurveda is consciousness-based Ayurveda. We've heard about this from Walter and very, very well described this morning by Professor John Hegelin. And also the importance of consciousness in Ayurveda is very well documented in the Ayurvedic classics. There are many sentences, many places where it says that Atma, that consciousness is extremely important. And Maharishi is reminded of us of this again and again and again. And sometimes one sees that some practitioners maybe don't put enough emphasis on that. But even according to the Ayurvedic classics, the importance of consciousness in Ayurveda is substantial. It's very central, and we've heard this many times. Now, what is consciousness? We've heard it very clearly this morning from Dr. Hegelin. He has described it all in a very excellent manner. Well, it doesn't matter. Technology doesn't seem... Huh? Pointer. This one? How do I point? Huh? This one. Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much. In this chart, we see just as a short reminder, what is consciousness? We see on the right side. Oh. What doesn't? On the right side, we see that in Maharishi's transcendental meditation, we experience that the thought process becomes quieter, quietens down more and more and more, until we finally experience a state of pure consciousness, a state where we are completely restful, completely awake, pure consciousness, consciousness all by itself. And on the left side of the chart, this chart shows the individual physiology, shows the different levels of the physiology. It shows the organs, the organ systems, tissues, cells, cell components, macromolecular systems, proteins, all the way down to the DNA, which is the basis of the individual physiology. And then at the basis, it shows the laws of physics, was very well described by Professor John Hegelin this morning, and shows the unified field of all the laws of nature is at the basis of the objective world. And the Veda informs us that this unified field, which is at the basis of the objective world, and the pure consciousness which we experience in ourselves, that this is the same Brahman, universal pure consciousness. So it's pretty clear to us, this is what is consciousness. And if you're in a Vedic country such as Nepal, you can hardly think of anything else. Only what the problem is that the scientific community today doesn't agree with this concept. The scientific community, and especially modern neuroscience, they don't agree with this. They think that consciousness gets created through physiological and biochemical interactions on the level of the brain. That the brain, through its brain chemistry, and that would mean on the left side of the chart, on the levels of the organ, the brain, the organs, nervous tissue, nerve cells, chemistry of the nerve cells, that on that level, consciousness gets created. And this opinion is outside the Vedic part of the world. Outside Nepal and India, this opinion is very strongly dominant. That consciousness actually gets created through material interactions. Through the material interactions within the brain, that they actually create consciousness. And so, the question is now, is consciousness created by the physiology of the brain? Which is what modern neuroscience says, and I tell you, there are papers in leading scientific journals about how consciousness, 20, 30 different theories about which interactions in which part of the brain somehow create consciousness. Is consciousness created by the physiology of the brain, or is it something basic in creation? And we have to understand that at the moment, this idea that neurosciences have, that the brain creates consciousness, there's no proof of this. They have not got any proof for this. And of course they understand that no one fully understands how the brain functions. It's very clear, the functioning of the brain is not fully understood, very clear. But neuroscience still believes that a full understanding of the brain will reveal that consciousness is a product of brain physiology. It's a belief. They believe this. There is no proof of this. It's a belief, and it's an idea, and it's very deeply inset. And so, the question is, can this question be decided through scientific research? Is it possible to decide which of these 2 points is correct through scientific research? And if we want to decide this by scientific research, we have to ask ourselves if we can formulate a testable hypothesis, a hypothesis which can be then tested by experiment. And such a hypothesis could be that if consciousness were completely and entirely created by the material physiology of the brain, then distance interactions between individuals or groups of individuals or individuals and inanimate objects would be only possible through the normal means, the so-called normal means, which are the 5 senses, through the organs of the body, or physical extensions thereof, like if you have sensors, electronic sensors of the brain in the brain or something like that, through social interaction, and through any other means mediated by the 4 well-formed, well-known forces of nature, which Dr. Heckelin described this morning. And here, of course, it's mainly the electromagnetic force, because the nuclear forces have a too short range and gravity is probably too weak for this in this context. Only this type of interaction is possible. If consciousness were completely and entirely created by the material physiology of the brain, then only interactions are based on normal type of interactions would be possible. Now, do other interactions exist in addition to the normal ones that I've just mentioned? And conceivable types of distance interactions, conceivable types, could be telepathy, for example, direct mental connection between individuals, clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is a remote cognition of objects. You cognize something on the other side of the world, or maybe even only in the next room. Psychokinesis, which are direct mental effects on objects, or group effects of consciousness, such as the Maharishi effect. Those are conceivable types of distance interactions. And if just one of these interactions can be conclusively shown to exist, if only one of them can be shown to exist, this falsifies the concept that consciousness is a product of brain physiology. Because no materialist theory of consciousness can explain this type of interaction. If consciousness is a product of brain physiology, if it gets produced through the biochemical interactions of the brain, then you can't imagine that it could be possible for two people to be connected telepathically or to cognize something on the other side of the world. It's inconceivable. And if any of these effects, any of the previous effects that I just mentioned exist, then it shows that consciousness can't be purely based on the material interactions of the brain. Now, if we go through the scientific research, and there's a lot, believe me, this type of interaction has been studied since the 19th century. Already in the end of the 19th century, a Society for Psychical Research was founded in Great Britain, in the US a bit later, and thousands, many thousands of studies have been done. And for example, telepathy, there's a method called the Ganzfeld method, and I have 9 more minutes, I can't explain to you what it is exactly. Or also telephone telepathy. Telephone telepathy is simple. So the phone rings, and you know intuitively who it is. This has been scientifically researched, and it's a phenomenon which exists. It can be proven that this phenomenon of telephone telepathy, that you know who it is, this exists. And this clearly demonstrates the existence of the phenomenon of telepathy. Clairvoyance. Clairvoyance experiments in remote viewing. The experimenter goes to a randomly selected place. The subject describes this place. Show that remote viewing is possible, and here we need gifted subjects. Not everybody can do this. It's one of the points in the research on this that the people's abilities in this respect vary greatly. The majority of the population, their abilities in this type of capability are very seriously limited, but with gifted subjects, such clairvoyance is possible. Someone was once in the 70s asked to visualize Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, and that person then said, Jupiter has a ring. And there was no, what? Jupiter has a ring? Saturn has rings. Nobody knew that Jupiter has a ring. Only then Voyager passed by Jupiter later and saw it really has a ring. So clairvoyance, this is just an anecdote, but real research has shown clairvoyance exists. Psychokinesis. Direct effects on matter by mental intention have been thrown through a number of methods. Throwing of dice, for example. Effect sizes of the studies are small, but with large numbers of studies in large meta-analysis, it can be shown that if by throwing of dice, the mental intention that you want a certain number up, if you have a large number of tests, not 1 or 3 tests, thousands of tests, you can see there's a statistical effect. Also, the effect of mental intention on random number generators exists. Mental intention influences random number generators. Direct mental interaction of living systems, that means galvanic skin resistance of subjects can be affected by mental attention of someone else. Someone else wants his skin resistance up or down, can be shown there's an effect. And the most interesting study here, I think, is in the level of quantum mechanics. We all know, or it would be nice to know, about the dual slit experiment in quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics, if electrons or photons are sent separately through a dual slit apparatus, 2 slits, then they create an interference pattern behind the 2 slits. And unless a measurement is taken, when there's a measurement done on one of the slits, which shows where the photon or the electron went through, then the so-called collapse of the wave function happens, and this interference pattern disappears. Should ask John Hegelin to describe the whole experiment in detail. He will be able to describe it in very great detail. But what's the interesting thing is that by mere intention with advanced subjects, through mere intention, it's been shown that this collapse of the wave function can take place. But the most interesting studies in this respect are the Maharishi effect. Persons practicing Maharishi's transcendental meditation experience calmness and inner bliss during the practice, we know that. And scientific studies show deep relaxation and improved EEG coherence, among other effects. Increased creativity, reduced stress, improved health, social behavior are scientific results shown by the transcendental meditation technique. And then these are studies on the individual. In 1974, a study showed decreased crime rate in 4 small cities when 1% of the population practiced TM. And larger studies later confirmed this effect. So a few people meditating have an effect on the entire society. Meditation might be a telepathic peace transmitter. A meditator is a telepathic peace transmitter who telepathically transmits peaceful influence to his environment or her environment. The extended Maharishi effect was then beginning in 1978. Repeated experiments on different levels showed that if people practice the advanced TM-City program in groups, then the square root of 1% of the population practicing together is sufficient to have an effect on the entire society. And there are at least 50 studies, really well-controlled, excellently controlled scientific studies done on this, on the extended Maharishi effect. The most recent and most powerful study on this effect showed a substantial reduction in many negative aspects of life in the US, when the number of persons practicing in a group at Maharishi International University reached the square root of 1% of the US population, 1,725 people exactly. And here, these charts show, the blue graph is the size of the group at MIU, and the other lines show a large number, show different indexes of stress. The red one is the US stress index, which is combined of murder and rape and assault and robbery and many other bad things that no one wants, that we don't even want to mention. And we can see that in the baseline period, which is before the group reached the necessary size, there was quite a high rate of these effects, Then during the demonstration period, which lasted for 4 years, all the negative effects went down very substantially. And then after the period was over, the negative effects all went up again. So we can see the extended Maharishi effect could be very clearly demonstrated, and unfortunately the effect collapsed when the size of the group was reduced. It was not there anymore, the effect collapsed. So all the effects, everything I mentioned here, is statistically very solidly established, very detailed statistics. And none of these effects would be possible, would be even conceivable. None of these effects would be even conceivable if consciousness were merely a product of the physical function of the brain. It would be impossible. There's no way that if the consciousness gets produced by the brain physiology, that this could be, any of these effects could be possible. The concept that consciousness, which is a concept that is very widely held in the neurosciences, that consciousness is fundamentally a product of brain physiology, it just doesn't agree with the experimental evidence. Consciousness, it is shown, this study shows, consciousness is a fundamental property in creation. There must be a fundamental field in creation, something on a very fundamental level, and Dr. Hegelin has told us more about it, Maharaja can tell us even many more things about it, but consciousness is a fundamental property in creation, and the brain merely modifies it and expresses it. Of course, the brain has an effect on consciousness. It modifies and expresses it. And then on the other side, the concept that consciousness is a fundamental property of nature, forms the theoretical basis to understand the phenomena previously described. Because concerning these phenomena, a good part of the world is in a state of mental denial. Because people don't understand how telepathy or remote cognition could exist, how that could be possible, then people just deny that they exist even though the research is clearly there. This forms the theoretical basis to understand the phenomena previously described. And hopefully, if this gets understood more, it will encourage the governments to utilize large groups of yogic flyers to create the Maharishi effect, to create more balance in society. Okay, and one more thing I wanted to just share briefly. It has been seen that I mentioned that in this research, it's been shown that the abilities of different people vary greatly. And maybe we can understand it like this, that the coupling factor between the individual consciousness and this unified field, this total consciousness, this coupling factor probably varies to a great extent between different people. So maybe everybody should put their attention on improving this coupling factor. And if this coupling factor could become very good and very total, maybe if the world consisted of people like that, we would see some very nice surprises. Okay, here is some literature for those who are interested, a short literature list. And otherwise, thank you very much.